Hey Tigers, welcome to the very first episode of our fractions review. We have been working super hard since Thanksgiving to really learn, practice, and master our fractions and all the different things we've learned about fractions. And that's super important because this week we get to show it all off with our Unit 3 exam. When is our Unit 3 exam, class?
Wednesday.
Thank you. So we got a lot of practicing to do. We're going to get started. The first topic we're going to review is equivalent fractions. We've learned a couple of ways to find and check equivalent fractions. And we're just going to review that quickly. Now, when we're talking about an equivalent fraction, we're talking about two different fractions that represent the same size whole, but are broken into different pieces. And the different number of pieces changes the number in our denominator. So we have to change the number in our numerator that we would need to color in to make it equivalent. Let me show you what I'm talking about, but you should remember because we've learned this already. So if I were to turn this into a fraction, let's say I colored in the first two pieces. Now, because there's 4 pieces total, 4 is my denominator, 2 colored in, 2 is my numerator. So this fraction is 2/4. Now, if I wanted to make an equivalent fraction using this whole, I would need to adjust my numbers because this one is broken into 8 pieces. So this numerator is 8, but if I still want to color in about the same amount, I now have to color in 4 pieces. So when we're talking about equivalent fractions, we're talking about equivalent fractions that have different numbers but represent the same amount in the same size whole. So when we want to be finding or checking equivalent fractions, there's two ways we've learned to do this. Now, the first thing we can do is check if a fraction is equivalent. So let's say the test asks us, is 3/4 equivalent to 1/5? Well, we could check this by using our butterfly method, and that's how we cross multiply and then check the cross products. So we would multiply 3 times 5, which is 15, 4 times 1, which is 4, and we notice 15 and 4 are not the same cross products, so these are not equivalent fractions. We would draw a line through the middle, and we would label it as not equivalent. Now that's one way we can work with our equivalent fractions, but we can only use that butterfly method if they've already given us two different fractions to check. So this might be a way to either solve a question that's just like this that says, are these equivalent? Or a way to check your answer if you have like 4 answer choices, A, B, C, and D, and you want to make sure you've chosen the correct one. But what do we do if we don't have another fraction to compare it to? Let's say they ask us to just find the fraction, or find a fraction that's equivalent to 2/3. Well, there's a couple of ways that we could do this, but we like one particular method that uses a certain rule. If my class can help me out, what rule do we use to find an equivalent fraction when we only have one fraction to work with?
The rule of jealousy.
The rule of jealousy. That means we can turn this fraction into an equivalent fraction of any size as long as we multiply or divide the top and the bottom number by the same digit. So for example, that would look like 2/3. If I want to find an equivalent fraction for it, I'm going to multiply 2 times 2, 3 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 2 is 6. This is my equivalent fraction. Now I want to point out something. When you're checking equivalent fractions, which might come up on a test where they ask you which one of these used the correct way to find an equivalent fraction, you want to make sure they multiply by the same number, top and bottom. Here we multiplied by 2. If we don't multiply by the same digit, top and bottom, we aren't following that rule of jealousy. And that rule of jealousy is what makes sure that our answer is equivalent. So this is a quick review of how to find and check equivalent fractions. Now remember, we could multiply or divide to find an equivalent fraction. We could use the butterfly method to check our work. And if we use pictures, I always want you to remember one last thing. What do we do if we're given pictures and we're checking if they're equivalent? Does anyone remember the trick that I want you to use every time to make sure we get it right?
You put the fraction next to them.
I label the fractions and I use the numbers. Please don't rely on just the pictures. Look how messy even Miss Nick's pictures are. Use the numbers as well. Label your numbers and then use your methods because you guys rock at this. All right, we'll be back with another episode. Next time we are going to go over how to compare our fractions and put them in order. See you later.
And cut.